This video is going to look at Fayol and his functions of management. In 1916, Henri Fayol wrote a model looking at what managers actually do. And although this was written in 1916, hopefully we can see that there are still some similarities. We may change some of the terminology, but the basic principles about what's involved in what managers actually do on a day-to-day basis is still relevant. This model is still relevant to us today. So according to Fayol, there are 5 different areas, different elements of what managers actually do. So identifying their functions or the roles, the activities that managers undertake. So looking at planning, organising, commanding, coordinating and controlling. And I'm going to look at each of those in a little bit more detail. And on the next slide, there is a table or a diagram which gives us a little bit more of an explanation for each of the different elements for this model. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in context of an example and talk through the example, explaining what would be involved in each of the different roles or the different activities so that you can see how this model would work. So starting off with forecasting and planning, or as it was referred to on the previous slide, planning. A manager will be looking to establish what's actually required, creating a plan of what they're going to be doing. So imagine that you have someone who works in a retail environment and it's August, September time, and they're thinking about the fact that they're going to get very busy as they get closer to Christmas under normal circumstances. So they anticipate that to cope with the increased demand, they will need to employ additional staff. So they will have an idea of when they need to start recruiting, how many staff they're going to need. So the forecasting and the planning is the fact that they know that they will need more staff, say by the end of October, beginning of November, going into December, it's going to get very busy. So they will have an idea from past experience of perhaps how busy they will get and how many more staff they might need. So the forecasting and planning will be thinking about how many staff they need, when do they need them in place for, and maybe thinking as well, do they need someone who has any particular skills? So are they looking for someone with customer service experience? Are they looking for someone that's got experience of working in a retail environment, or will they provide the training and support those employees? So they're the kind of things they're going to be thinking about in the forecasting. If they require to train staff, for example, then they will need to employ them earlier so that they can provide the training, so that by the time they've had their training, the staff are ready to start work. So moving on from forecasting and planning to organisation. Organisation is about being more specific, taking the high level objectives that the manager has created and breaking that down into what's actually required. So, one of the tasks might be that they need to go and talk to HR, let HR know that they're going to need assistance with recruiting. Is that something the manager can do themselves, or do they have to go and talk to HR? How do they advertise? How do they promote the job? How do they organise the interviews? All of those different things could be dividing the work down into tasks. So if the project is to have 20 new staff ready to start work mid-November, then you need to think about what's actually required to make sure that happens. So the manager will think about what's required, what they need to happen, and think about who's actually going to be responsible for making this happen. Is the manager going to be involved directly? Are they going to delegate it and get someone else to do the task? And sometimes that can be within the road department. Sometimes it can be bringing in other departments. So for example, I did say, going and talking to HR and finding out if there's any support from HR, maybe having to go and talk to finance to find out, is there budgeting available? So finding out the individual tasks of what's involved, finding out who's the best person to do those jobs, then If you are delegating to, say, an assistant manager to carry out the interviews, does that manager have the skills to do that? And if not, you then maybe also need to organise training for the manager so that the manager can actually carry out the task that you're allocating to them. So all of that would be part of the organisation. Once you've decided who's doing what, you then need to go and talk to them and say, right, okay, I have decided that, Brenda, I want you to organise the interviews. So you'd need to actually, part of the command is, maybe we wouldn't use the word commanding staff anymore. You wouldn't go to, the manager is unlikely to go to the staff and tell, order them to do something. It's going to be much more collaborative, perhaps. So, but it is still this idea of the manager going to the staff and saying, I need you to do this, or I would like you to do this. So it's still this idea of passing on instructions so that the employees, the subordinates, know what they need to do to carry out the task that they're being asked to do. And if necessary, delegate authority to them so that they don't have to keep coming back to the manager to get approval for everything, that the authority is delegated and that the managers or the subordinates are able to carry out their tasks, whether that's issuing instructions to someone else, whether it's going and talking to HR rather than having to go back to the manager and then getting the manager to talk to HR. All of those sorts of things would all be part of command. So it's making sure that the direct reports know exactly what they have to do, but if they need the authority to carry out additional tasks, that the manager is giving them that authority as well, so that the manager can focus on their part of the project and they're not getting caught up with all the details of everybody else's part of the task as well. So once we've done that, we know what our task is, we've broken it down into the component parts, we've allocated the individual tasks to the most appropriate people. You want to make sure that they're working well together, that everything's running smoothly, and that's where your coordination would come in. And that could be done through things like, just going and talking to people, but organising staff briefings, find out how everybody's getting on, organising perhaps team meetings so that the different people involved in the project can come together, they can discuss how they're getting on, they can discuss if they've got any problems, they can ask for help. But it's also about building that team working, that dynamic between the members of the team so that they will work well together as well. So coordination's about making sure that everything's running smoothly. And then the final element would be the control. Perhaps again, as I say, the terminology might have changed slightly, but the principles behind it are still the same. Control, or perhaps now we would say monitoring, but control is about looking to make sure, are the tasks getting done? Are there any obstacles? Or have there been any problems? Does anybody need any help? And if there are problems or something's not being completed on time, then what steps can be taken to actually resolve that or fix that? So the manager's role at this point will be to monitor to make sure the task is getting done. And if it's getting done, that's brilliant. But if for any reason that's not happening, the manager can step in and try to resolve the problem to make sure that the project is still on track. So I hope that has helped you to understand Fayol's functions of management. Thank you very much for listening.